Welcome to the 12th District. We're halfway through summer here at NCW Life TV. I'm Kerry Condado. Well, there's a lot of news out there. We want to get to it today, and we're going to talk a lot about energy. Energy seems to be the real focus right now. The world seems to want to go electric, and electrification being a big part of the climate change situation, it's important that we look forward and determine how we're going to produce that electricity, because right now we don't have the production capability to do all the things that Washington State wants to do. Electrifying homes and electrifying cars and electrifying buses and other things takes a great deal of energy, and if we're going to move in that direction, and it seems like that's where it's going, at least now, we're going to need more power. And of course, some people think that hydrogen is the future, but you got to understand that hydrogen has to be produced with electric power, and it takes a great deal of electric power to produce hydrogen. And frankly, wind energy and solar energy and hydro energy aren't going to get us there. But there may be a solution. We're going to talk about that in the show today. Towards the end of the show, I'm going to bring up some really interesting political news. There is a major new development on the political front in the governor's race. Not just that Dave Reichert is in the race, but we'll tell you what the national folks are saying about that at the end of this program. Also, there is an election going on. I hope you're all going to vote. I know it's school boards, it's mayors, it's just local elections, but they're extremely important. So I encourage you to fill out that ballot and get them in. All right, we'll come back, talk a little bit about the economy, but mostly about energy and how possibly Washington State is going to lead the way. All right, welcome back. We're going to talk about energy a little bit today. It seems to be most of the news stories. Of course, that has a lot to do with the climate change, the temperatures, and all the other things that are going on, but it does seem to be a point of concern in more ways than one. First, let's take a look at the general economy. Rates are on hold from the Fed, but they are still talking about another increase or two coming up. That may be changing because the inflation numbers are finally starting to come down. They're not coming down quickly, but they are coming down, and that's a good thing, other than energy, which we're going to talk about shortly. Home building is down 8% nationally in the last month. We expected that to happen, so the real estate market is cooling off. I think there's no doubt that prices are falling in a lot of areas. Some areas are holding up better than others. The labor market is still a mess, and I am not sure any economist or any politician knows exactly why. No matter where you go, no matter where you travel, and we've just been out on the road recently, every restaurant, every small business, it seems, in every town is looking for help and having a hard time getting it. And when they do get the help, it's not always the highest quality. So this continues to be an issue for a lot of small business people, as if they weren't facing enough. The labor shortage is a major problem, and it is in this area as well for restaurants and small businesses in the Wenatchee, Chelan area. They are all struggling to find people willing to come to work. So that is going to continue to be a problem for the economy moving forward. Although so far in 2023, all the doom and gloom projections because of the higher interest rates have not materialized. Frankly, the economy's held up fairly well, but nobody seems to know exactly where it goes from here. We're in kind of uncharted territory. But energy, as I said earlier, is a big part of everything that's going on. Let's talk about a few things energy related. Well, the building code that Washington has put together that was introduced in the last session was supposed to take place in July, take effect, I should say, and it was delayed till October because of a couple of lawsuits from Avista Energy, Cascade Natural Gas. Now, part of this major building change is that there will be no gas fossil fuel appliances, period. Starting in October, homes have to be built primarily with heat pumps for heating and cooling, and electric appliances, electric stoves. So Washington is one of the first. There are a couple other states doing the same thing, but we were first to put this into gear, and of course the lawsuits are flying, and that's not just here. There's a pushback on this nationally. Natural gas is actually a fairly clean fuel and fairly efficient, and there's some concern about whether this is really going too far or too fast. Well, the judge in Spokane doesn't think so. A federal judge has upheld the building code in a major decision, which could ripple across the United States, saying that he's not going to stand in the way of progress towards fixes for climate change, and therefore these building codes will go into effect in October. As far as he's concerned, he said he wasn't even sure he had jurisdiction. The argument had to do with the fact that the national laws are different than the state laws, so there's still going to be some arguing on this, but it looks to me like we may be going to an all-electric future. Well, those gas prices just keep haunting people. The price of gas in the state still #1 week after week. We're the highest in the nation thanks to our carbon exchange program or carbon tax program that we've talked about. But here's part of the problem, and this is where a lot of the environment economy things kind of clash. If the price of gas continues to go up, and it looks like it will, the volume of fuel will go down. It's a natural economic factor that if price gets higher, people will use less. And of course, that's part of the plan. The environmentalists would like to see less fossil fuel burned and people looking for other alternatives. So the fact is they are seeing a decline, I think for the first time, in gas taxes, or they're expecting a decline. Now, they've talked about it slowing down because gas taxes have increased with population and more cars on the roads, about 6 million cars on the road in Washington State. So the gas tax has increased over a series of years, but lately it's gone flat. Of course, that's got a lot to do with electric cars coming online. Electric cars pay tabs, but don't pay really a fuel tax, so to speak, although they could. There's no reason you can't tax electricity like you can fuel, but they haven't done that. And so the gas tax is going flat. At the same time, there is a high demand for roads, for road improvements, bridge improvements, and that kind of thing. So here comes the state of Washington with their latest is the vehicle miles travel tax is back. They talked about putting it on hold for a few years, but that's not going to happen now. With these gas prices and the potential decline in gas tax, there is a fury now to get the VMT back on track. The state just finished up a test pilot program with over 1,000 people. There were 3 phases to this program, and 1,000 people tested the system. And frankly, it had some mixed reviews. 88% of the people on the system were self-reporting. There's 2 choices. You can self-report your miles or you can use GPS. Only 12% of the people chose to use the GPS because they feared for their own security. The fact that they know everywhere you're going, where you're at, various other security issues with your systems, most people went for the self-reporting, which, could be questionable as far as how accurate that may be. 54% of the people in a test said they had security issues. So that is a major problem for this project moving forward, but Washington is determined to have it in place by 2025. There is various approaches, but some of them say keep the gas tax and add vehicle miles traveled to phase it in. Others say get rid of the gas tax. Right now, the price per mile on the test program was 2.4 cents per mile. That's roughly the equivalent in gas tax of about 18 to 20 miles to the gallon. So, of course, that will go up like everything else. And the biggest question about VMT, vehicle miles traveled, is will you protect it for roads? Because the VMT tax is not protected under the 18th Amendment of the state constitution. The gas tax is and has been set aside for roads for years. And so there's a question of whether this movement is more about money or more about being able to use that money for things other than roads. Speaking of which, there was a great opinion piece in the Spokane paper talking about the declining road situation. Rather interesting that Washington State has applied for a lot of federal money. They get it. And for years and years and years, we had some of the best roads in the United States until about 2001, according to this opinion piece. The legislature started to divert funds, change funds away from roads and into multimodal and other things. Well, what they could, the federal money. Of course, the gas tax is dedicated to roads. But they started to move that money, and the roads started to decline. And according to this gentleman, who seems to be an expert on roads and bridges, says we are in a state of decline that will be hard to repair. At some point, it will just be priced out of the market. He claims right now there's about $50 billion to get the roads and bridges back into any kind of serious condition. There are a lot of them that are failing. And if you've driven around this state recently, you probably noticed that the roads and the bridges aren't in the best condition. This is because the legislature has not done what previous legislatures did for years and take care of the roads and bridges in Washington State. They found other places to put that money. Of course, speaking of those gas prices, the legislature, Jay Inslee, has even talked about a special session to put some sort of a bill through to limit the gas companies, limiting the gas companies on pricing because he says they're gouging. Of course, my opinion is, I think most people that understand the systems, is that the state is who's gouging. One of the highest gas taxes in the United States, plus the carbon tax on top of that, it's pretty close to $1 a gallon, if not exceeding $1 a gallon right now. That's a lot more than the gas companies make on a gallon of gas, despite what you hear from the talking heads. The fact is they seem to clear about 20 cents a gallon is what they're claiming. I mean, what the experts say, when you get refinement, delivery, they don't count, a lot of folks don't count that. They just count the barrel of oil. But there's a lot more to it. And so while the oil companies might be making 20, 25 cents a gallon, the state is making $1 a gallon. So who's gouging who is what I'd like to know. Of course, the Republicans would like to just repeal that carbon tax or change it to a regional tax, try to find a way to make it more palatable, because the price of fuel is hard on people, particularly at the lower income levels. And on top of that, as most of you noticed in the last week or two, your paycheck is now declining because of the long-term care tax, which was also added just recently. Well, there's a fix for all this. In the long run, there is a fix that we talked about on this show. In terms of electrification, if we're going to go there, and it seems like that's where it's headed, we don't have the current power to do it. But about 4 or 5 years ago, when we started this show, we suggested the direction we should go. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that option and how it just became a reality in Washington State. All right, welcome back. We're talking about energy today because energy in the economy seems to be on the front lines right now, with energy taking the lead. The cost of energy here, particularly fuel, is the highest in the nation. But look, the pressure is on now with these rising temperatures, at least the claimed rising temperatures. There's a lot of talk about it now nationally as well as internationally, that some of the highest temperatures recorded in the last 100 years have happened in the last few weeks. So there will be more of a push regardless of what is causing this. And there's still some people that think one way or the other. But the fact is there's a big push to move the climate change agenda. Well, how do you do that? If you're going to electrify all houses, you're going to electrify cars, electrify buses, and I want to talk about electrifying trains. They want to do it all with electricity. You're going to have to build electricity. You're going to have to make electricity. We just simply don't have enough. Wind isn't always the answer because it's intermittent. It isn't consistent. So the wind generators are only good for so much. Solar works good on the housetop, but not so much in the field. The big giant solar farms don't produce that much, and there's starting to be questions about their environmental impact. Down in California, they've had a number of problems, and in Nevada with these big solar farms and water issues. So solar may not be the long-range answer, except possibly on the rooftops. Hydro works great. We've proven it here in the state of Washington, putting out more megawatts than any other state in hydro, but it's limited. We have what we have, and there's no chance probably to expand it at this point with the environmentalists where they stand. They want to take out dams. They don't want to put them in. And so hydro is probably tapped out. Well, where do we go? Well, I think the answer may be here, right here in Washington State, as I've said for 4 years, and that is small modular reactors. It's a new technology. It's an updated technology of an old technology. What's a small modular reactor? Well, these are the same type of energy units that run in ships, mostly military, and in submarines around the world. And they've been doing it since the 60s. As a matter of fact, they were developed in the 50s. And it's a lot of this technology that's still floating around out there in the ocean is very old. It's not even close to up to date, but it's working very well. These ships can run for years on one charge of nuclear fuel. They only have to be recharged once in a while. The subs can stay underwater, indefinitely. It's amazing what they've been able to do with these small modular reactors. They're just smaller units than what you've been used to in these big nuclear power plants. So several companies have worked on developing these. NuScale in Portland, Oregon is one of them, and X Energy is also another company that is working on these small modular nukes. Now, what's unique about them is they're building them modularly so that you can transport them. In other words, they're built off-site. These are small modulars. They can be put on a ship, they can be put on a truck even in pieces and reassembled at the site. So these modular reactors can go anywhere. You could put one out at the Alcoa plant here south of Wenatchee. Grant County is talking about putting one in or getting one put in over by the server farms at some point to power those server farms and get the rest of the energy freed up for other uses. Any way you look at it, you've got to find more energy, and small modular nuclear seems to be the answer right now. It's carbon-free energy. Waste is a minimal issue, can be reprocessed and can be dealt with, and they don't create a lot of waste because they're smaller. And so, even so far as the NuScale model, they've built a nuclear ship. In other words, a nuclear module on a floating vessel, very similar to one of the military vessels, but it's primarily just to make power. You can literally pull it up at a dock and hook it into the grid. Now, let's say a country had a major catastrophe and lost their power grid or lost their power plant, or like the nuclear energy plant that failed in Japan. Well, you can pull this ship up and hook it up to the grid and create power, and this thing is totally portable. It can move around. So there is a lot of technology, a lot of great things happening around nuclear energy. Now, fusion, other new things are coming, but they're not here yet. And with the pressure on this electrification, it's going to need to be sooner than later that the power increases, or we're going to be like California, where you can't charge your electric car at certain hours, and they have brownouts and rotating shutdowns, and this is not the kind of thing we want to face. There's also an economic consideration here. Getting basically energy independent again would be a good thing. We got there under the Trump administration. It was a good thing for economics, a good thing for the United States, and a good thing for security. And the fact is, being completely independent on power and not relying on other countries is a good thing. And I think it's a good way to go. So I said this was going to happen. I said it needed to happen, and I even said where it was going to happen. Well, it was pretty obvious. Hanford. We're one of the few places in the United States that has a nuclear energy facility. We have a power plant down there right now, a nuclear power plant run by Energy Northwest, and it has done a great job. It powers up 1,200 megawatts, a little over 1,200 megawatts, and can power a city of 1 million people. So it is very efficient. It's done a great job. It's older technology, but it's still operating and probably has another 30 to 40 years left in it before it goes away. But the good news is they're on it. Energy Northwest has now contracted with X-Energy to buy at least 1, but up to 10 modular nuclear reactors for Hanford. Well, this is exactly what we talked about needing to happen years ago. And they're trying to have these units online by 2030. The first ones should be built in the next few years, and they hope to have up to 10 of them functional by 2030. They put out about 80 megawatts a unit. They have a fast shutdown. That's another thing about these. If there's any problems in the plant, any problem with the modular reactor, it can be shut down in a matter of hours instead of days. This makes them a lot safer. The cooling mechanisms are safer. They can retain a lot more energy and sustain a lot more heat than any of the current products. So much safer, much more efficient, and they're going to be built off-site and then delivered to Hanford and hooked into the grid, which already exists right there. So the solution that we talked about several times over the past 3 or 4 years looks like it's coming to light, and that will put Washington State at the very forefront of energy development. I think that's a very good thing, and I'm very excited that it happened. I'm a little surprised that the state hasn't stepped in and stopped it. There's a lot of environmental concerns from people that maybe don't understand how the system works, or maybe they do and just don't like nuclear energy. But the state looks like they're going to go forward with this, and I think it's fantastic. So there you go. Washington State leading the way on energy. Now, if we could just get those fuel costs down a little bit, make things a little more comfortable. We'll be right back to wrap it up here on the 12th District. All right. Well, there's a little talk about energy, some exciting news. I think it's just fantastic that we're finally going to see what we've needed to see for some time, a move forward on nuclear. I think that will solve a lot of our issues and power going forward, probably keep the price fairly reasonable too. All right, I told you to have some political news for you about the governor's race. Of course, we're all excited about Dave Reichert getting into the race because he's a formidable candidate and seriously has a chance of winning because King County is where you have to win. In Washington State, if you win 40% or more as a Republican in King County, you generally can take the statewide election, so there's a possibility that could happen. And it's Roll Call Magazine, national magazine and national polling company, research company, that says they have just changed Washington State from a solid blue to a battleground state in the governor's race. That is amazing news. We haven't seen that in 20 years. They actually think that Dave Reichert is competitive head-on-head with Bob Ferguson. That's probably going to be your two candidates. Now, speaking of elections, have you filled out those ballots? I told you earlier, it's a great time to vote because it's local elections. And folks, those school board races count. Now, you've watched your school board schools in general deteriorate. The public schools are having severe problems right now, and they need some better leadership. So vote carefully, but let's get some folks in there that can turn this thing around and try to get these public schools back on track. They are certainly suffering at this point. Also, mayors in Leavenworth, Chelan, and Wenatchee for 4 more years. Somebody's going to run the show. You're going to determine that. So make sure you get your vote filled out and get it in the box, and we'll talk a little bit more about that local race when it happens in early August. They'll count those votes. We'll see where we're at. Lots more politics, lots more economy coming up in the next few weeks. And yes, we will have Dave Reichert himself on this show very soon. He's a busy guy right now. We're just trying to find some time to get him on the 12th District. He'll be coming in the next week or two. Thanks a lot for being with us. We'll see you next week.